Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Magnetic Podcast. Super excited today. We have Brandon from Alfré. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Brandon. And when we first met, I immediately was like, I need to get this guy on the podcast. We're all about finding how to build passionate brand communities here at Magnetic. And Brandon, I think, is one of the best at doing it and has already sort of built a community around his brand. So, Brandon, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate you joining. To kick things off, would love to hear a little bit about yourself, the brand, and how you got here today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Super pumped about this. Um, yeah, I mean, honestly, it was kind of like one of those stories where you leave the corporate world and you just don't like waking up and going to work. And for that, I was doing investment banking in New York. I graduated in 2019. Had this like idea of, I'm going to be this like finance, guy in New York, like wearing banker bags, loafers, like doing kind of basically following everyone in my like school. And I did it. I was super excited. I was like, this is going to be my career for the rest of my life, working really hard. And like 6 months in, I was waking up and I'm like, this is not something that I could do for the rest of my life. Maybe I just wanted to kind of see different realms of the creative side, mixed with some business. And, it was at that point where I was like, okay, I need to do something else. No idea what I was going to do. I was 23 and, at 23, you don't really leave that quickly, let alone like in finance in New York. Like it's kind of like, what are you doing? Like, and so I just, if you don't like doing something, I always felt like you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't really you shouldn't really spend your time, energy there if, you can improve and learn and grow somewhere else that you genuinely like doing. So I really wanted to go into this like branding, marketing realm of just career choice and work. I always thought it was interesting. I've always looked at brands, whether it's a TV commercial, like cereal, the boxes at like Whole Foods. I'm like, oh, that's good. That's bad. Why is this better than that one? I've always thought that way. And so I thought branding would be kind of like a good next step. And I essentially fell into this idea of I like clothing, but my certain taste and aesthetic is more of this like traditional classic menswear. And I was seeing all these like cool streetwear brands kind of implement their strategy. And I said, hey, I think this could be done better. I think the community can be built better. I think the brand can be built better. And in terms of the classic menswear space, what is lacking from like just looking at it from an actual consumer? I thought everything was wrong, and I still think it's wrong, the industry. And so we're trying to basically create this cool, fun, culturally relevant, authentic, community focused, but with insane quality craftsmanship from Europe brand that guys can actually be a part of and be comfortable and approachable with, instead of being like so kind of stagnant in this like traditional realm of like clothing. And so I just had an idea, went with it. And 3 years later, basically, here I am. Lots of mistakes.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're definitely going to be jumping into a lot of that because a lot was in there. I think first off, really cool to hear your background in sort of the finance realm. I think I kind of fell into that same world where I went to business school, and then you're kind of told, hey, like this is the path,
Yeah.
and you're like, New York, like let's do it. Let's go make a bunch of money and we're going to have so much fun. And then you realize like those places aren't necessarily the best for creative people. It's kind of where creativity goes to die in a lot of ways, depending on what, for anybody in finance out there. I don't think there's probably too many listeners. So, I definitely can sympathize with that. I think not a place where ideas are going to be free flowing. I think it's like a place where ideas go to potentially be, to die. So
Yeah. But when
sympathize with you there.
but when you went to business school though, I'm assuming, because I've never, I never really had that opportunity just because I'm doing this, but also if I've always thought if I did go to business school, like the purpose of that is to maybe start a company with someone that you meet. Was that
Mm.
kind of your thought
Yeah, I
process?
guess when I say business school, I think I mean just the undergrad business school. So
Okay.
I never got like a master's in business or anything like that, but I'm more referring to sort of undergrad business
Yeah.
school.
Yeah. Undergrad, very few people know like what they're actually going to do unless you're like in those paths where you actually have to be, doctor, not so much lawyer, but um, yeah,
Yeah, I think for me, business was like, I went there. I went to a school called Loyola. It's a smaller school on the East Coast, and I went there mainly just to play lacrosse. And so when I got there, I remember thinking in my head like, I want to be a doctor. I want to go into pre med.
yeah,
I want to do sort of the path to being a doctor. And I remember the coach first week sat me down. He's like, what kind of major do you want? And I was like, I'd like to be in biology pre med. And he said, hey, do you want to play here? And I was like, I do want to play here. He's like, all right, so are you smart? And I was like, I like to think so. And he's like, all right, finance. So that's kind of how I got into it. But overall, I think it was a great place to start. You learn a lot about how businesses work, really how money works. And I do appreciate that part of it. But outside of that, I think, the best environment for me is a place where I'm learning a ton, drinking from a fire hose. And I think for me, tech was sort of that world.
yeah,
Uh, cool. So I want to dive into, you mentioned, there's a few things you mentioned. One is taking a look at Whole Foods boxes and thinking, man, that's not it. Talk to
yeah.
me a little bit about like how you think about branding and how do you differentiate a good brand from a bad one?
That's a good question. Like branding, you can't really train. It's more of like you literally have to immerse yourself constantly. And I think from, when I was younger, I've always thought that way. It was always like brand first. Even if it was like subconsciously, I had no idea this was like a thing. That's how I thought. So if I'm looking at like a cereal box, I look at it and I say, did that just convince me to buy it? Or did that convince me to read it or to stare at it longer than that box right there? And then what's the messaging? And then also that's one aspect. The second aspect, it's not so much competition. That's obviously like a big factor of like how can you position your brand differently than someone else. But two, is it cohesive? So do I understand it? Right? Does the top of the line where you like, oh, and I'm just like trying to picture, I haven't bought cereal in like, I don't know how long, but like a box of cereal, I'm assuming like there's like a little opening with like dots, like at the top where like you open it, maybe, I don't know. But do those dots, are those on brand with like the rest of what that box is trying to say and what that brand's trying to say? I'm like so picky where like if a dot is black at the top, but like everything else is like yellow and like white and I don't know, maybe colors that like don't make sense with that like line, like that's to me is like, well, that's bad branding. Or that's like a fault that they should fix because I think every aspect of brand has to be like so focused on like every little detail because that's who you're representing with your company. So like for my company, branding is so big from like the way that we talk to our club members, right? Like I don't call my club members customers which they are customers because that's a transaction. That's a part of our brand to make them feel more special and more focused, or not focused, but more involved in our circle of community, as opposed to, oh, you just bought our product. That's a transaction. You're our customer, right? From the packaging to like how we fold it, the sticker, like, the way things are represented, that's like a huge part of branding. And I think, to go to your point of like grocery stores, that's like what I think of literally every aspect, clothing, if I buy like a Amazon product, that's obviously a little different. Amazon branding is very different than like real world branding. We could talk about that, but like, you know, that's how I view it.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's an element of there's a few elements, but it sounds like consistency in terms of how you are positioning yourself, consistency and intentionality behind it, making sure that there's intention behind every touch point with that customer from a product perspective, but also it sounds like from the way you communicate with them to the way that maybe your website looks, to the way that the navigation bar functions. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
100%. And like, I might not be the demographic or that customer, but I can tell from the brand and the representation who that customer should be. And if I can understand that, then that's really good branding.
How do you think about, so knowing how important being consistent and being so precise is, I mean, how do you get to that point? Because I'm sure there's some people that whose brand, I mean, my brand included, right? Nifty Bridge. I think we're servicing a lot of different types of customers that all have the same problem. So sometimes it can be hard to be super honed in to the point where every last detail is right. How did you guys get to that point, or how was that just right from the beginning? You knew exactly kind of the market you wanted to go after, exactly the voice. Like, talk to me a little bit about how you got to that point where it was so intentional, it was so consistent, you knew exactly what you guys wanted to be.
Yeah. So branding is always ever evolving. Like, if you look at just brands throughout history, them 20 years ago is not the same brand now. In a general, like, umbrella sense, yes, it is. And those are the ones that last. Those are the ones that are very strategic and understand their pain points, their aesthetic, their culture, their demographic. But there are, like, the way I think about it is like there are brands, like sub brands, sub years, sub collections, sub products that fall under this umbrella, and that can be different. That can be so different, but as long as it fits with their core. So for example, for us, I always had that umbrella, that vision, right? But it takes time to understand like what that real umbrella is. Like, we're only a year and a half old. And when I said I started this 3 years ago, I started the idea 3 years ago. It took me like 2 years, a year and a half to like make every mistake possible. Bad photo shoots, bad branding, bad, literally everything was bad. And I'm maturing, I'm understanding, I'm researching, I'm talking to people, I see things, I improve, I iterate. And that's part of the brand, that's part of the process. So even now, like, the brand that I have right now is going to be different than the brand next year, because I'm always looking at how I can improve the brand, improve the customer experience, improve the website. Does this font, does this color resonate with who we are at this time? But the entire vision of being this like very fun, playful, elegant, sophisticated brand that, is approachable and kind of resonates more deeply with a more modern guy and consumer, that's always there. But like, how can we improve that process? That's how I basically see branding. You can't be a perfect brand, but you can try to improve what you're doing always.
Yeah, so I think for you, it's like, it sounds like the values, right? Those aren't going anywhere, but in terms of the actual execution, that obviously is dynamic because, I mean, your consumers are dynamic, right? Like what
Right.
people wear 2 years ago in business is certainly changing today. And I think you guys, it sounds like, are trying to carve out your own space as well. So I think I want to transition into your brand and what you guys are doing. I know you mentioned at the very beginning, you said, hey, today, the market, right? You thought there was something missing, or you thought that there was a voice that wasn't really being spoken to. Can you talk a little about just like your brand and what that message is and what that voice is, the ideal customer for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this like classic menswear industry, button downs, polos, vests, like this more like elegant, sophisticated type of dress and wear. I think it's the marketing and the branding and the community that they're actually cultivating is really kind of old fashioned. I think it's pretty boring. I think it's kind of the same thing that they've always done, and they're just trying to repurpose it into like a way that they don't understand. This generation like really understands it. And to me, it's like really culturally based. So like, what is the culture right now for this guy, right? Like, where does he travel? What does he do? How does he talk? How does he want to look? How does he, what does he watch on TV? What sports does he play? Like all these things, that's what's associated with our brand. And we're basically saying, hey, we fundamentally understand your culture as like a guy, whether you're whether you're an artist, whether you're a photographer, an athlete, an actor, a finance guy, a lawyer, a doctor, whatever. There's this common ground of, we can be this elegant, fun, playful guy in 2023 and beyond. What does that look like? How are you going to dress? How are you going to style? Where are you going to wear it to? Right. So now we're like ever evolving of, this is our first year that we've kind of understood what our fall winter collection is going to be. Where is it going to be? Like we're going to Europe, and I'm not going to say like where, because we're going to do it like next week, but we're going to this place in Europe and saying, okay, this is kind of the aesthetic of this fall winter campaign. This is how this clothing is going to make you feel. And we think that is what the modern guy and this modern aesthetic should be. You can interpret it however you want, but we're basically saying this, having this foundation of what guys can basically mold to their lives and their lifestyle, which I think a lot of menswear brands, what they do is say, here, this is it. This is what you should wear it with. This is how you should do it. And that's it. They don't care about, everything else. As opposed to what we do is we care about everything else. We care about how you're wearing it, what you're going to wear it to, why you're going to wear it for that occasion. And I think it really resonates with the guys that we've had in our community, in our club. And that obviously, if we're going to like technical aspects of retention, LTV, that's like really our driving factor of growth. And I think that's where we're really differentiated in this space. And doing it in like a really cool, playful way. I think that's like the key aspect of it.
Really interesting. I definitely think right off the bat for someone that doesn't necessarily always get pushed towards the kind of business attire world, I think a lot of that comes from PTSD from, wearing a suit and tie every day in New York. I do think that there is a missing kind of voice to where you can be those things and not be a stiff, or someone that just kind of it fits the bill of, a New York suit, right? I think that's what you're kind of getting at is there's more than just the clothes. There's that personality, that playfulness that you guys are trying to bring to more of a traditionally stiff, I guess, market.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like most of our clothes are very casual, dress up, dress down. We're starting off there purposefully because that's the brand, that's the character, that's the persona. Like you can be very sophisticated, very elegant, but you don't have to wear this like standard, dress collar or this dress fabric, right? It could be an Oxford, it could be a button down that you wear untucked. If you want to tuck it in, wear a tie, wear a blazer with it. We can do both. Yeah. But it's like this kind of mentality of there's not just one way of doing things. And I think that's why I started the brand was as a consumer, there was always just this one way, this one aesthetic, this one vibe of this super like proper gentleman, he's supposed to be, how he's supposed to act, how he's supposed to dress. And that's like totally not the case. You can do that, but also just be like a, chill, normal guy, like doing what, living your life.
Yeah. I want to ask you, this is a question that I was thinking about is there's a lot of things that you're trying to accomplish with your brand in terms of the voice, in terms of the target, in terms of making people feel like it was made just for them, this kind of sector that you have identified. How much of how you speak to those customers and showing them that you're all those things is product, and how much of that is messaging? Is it 20/80? Is it 50/50? Like, I'm really curious as to when because you're obviously doing the product itself and designing that, right? Where you mentioned, but you're also having to think about how you communicate with them. So I'm just curious, what does that split look like? Like, is it, you know,
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Um, I would say, I think there's three parts. There's experience and communication. There's imagery, so like photo shoot, creative content, and then there's the actual product design. I think the product design, I think I've honestly never been asked this question before, and I'm basically just thinking this for the first time, but I would say that messaging uh, would probably be like 40% if you were to split it in three. If you were to split it in two, it would probably be like 60, 65%. The product design is extremely important, right? Like the way that we've differentiated from the start is we said everyone has a white Oxford, everyone has a blue Oxford. Why don't we create something that isn't really on the market right now? And that's an Oxford button down with a contrast collar in different colors, not just blue and not just pink, right? We did a gray one, we did a green one. And that shirt for the last, we've been pushing it as our core product and it's our best seller for the last year and a half. 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, we were just featured in the Wall Street Journal in paper and print, in digital and print, saying that this style is back. Like cool guys are starting to wear this banker style shirt, but in a casual, less formal setting. That's because of us, right? Like we're fundamentally bringing a design that maybe was cool back in the 80s, but if you look at it now and do research on it, there's not really anyone that's doing it in a casual, untucked, cool button down Oxford way, right? You have the club collar that Ralph Lauren does. You have Todd Snyder, which, tried to do it after we did it and added a button to it. And like you're seeing like articles written about this contrast style coming back. And it's like, we're fundamentally, that's our design. So if we can innovate and create something via our design, that's like a huge aspect of it. So I'd say that's like 30%. Other 30 is imagery, right? Like no one's going to buy your shirt or your product if you have a crappy photo shoot, because again, that photo shoot is representative of who your brand is and your messaging and your products. So, we always have incredible photo shoots, incredible art direction, creative direction, styling. That's not too fashion forward, but enough to say, this is a level up from where you're at right now. Different fabrics, different, embroideries, different trims, like everything is like so detailed. And then the third is, obviously that like messaging and that communication, the customer service, the experience on the website, the post-purchase flow. Like it's so curated in a sense that I think it's kind of all equal. Like one part doesn't really work without the other, and you can't achieve certain things without them linking together. And that's the whole brand, right? So it's basically like your entire brand is so important.
Yeah, do you mind kind of going back quickly and summarizing that for people listening? Because a lot of people will just hit the short clip. So kind of breaking that down. I know you mentioned there's three parts to that. They're probably all equal. Can you give us that again?
So there's three parts that I would say intertwine, and you can't do certain things without the other. 33% is the actual product design. So we were featured in the Wall Street Journal with our contrast Oxford button-down shirts, which they're not all white shirts. They're not all blue shirts. They have a white contrast look. That is one key element. The second key element is having that actual imagery, art direction, creative direction, the photo shoots, what your brand actually represents in a visual aspect. so they can see, the customer, the club member can see, this is how you're going to wear it. This is the aesthetic of the brand. Third is the actual experience, website, email, copy, customer journey flow, right? Like that's, and they're all intertwined together. And I think each one has a pivotal point in actually resonating with, a demographic.
Yeah, I like how too, I'm thinking of you talking about those three pieces. I also see like potentially three different senses that you're hitting. Like the product is obviously like you're touching that, you're feeling that, you can be in it and kind of understand exactly what you're telling them. So hearing that message, and then just seeing it. So the visuals, the artistic direction. I think that that's actually a really interesting aspect of what you're talking about is there's different senses that your brand needs to capture, and all of those senses need to tie into that product and that vision that you have for it.
Yeah. Like I really don't see it as, your customer journey has to be like 80% of it, or like the website has to be 80%, or the ads have to be 80%. Because if your fabrics aren't on point, if you're not working with the best mills, the best cut and sew, factories that we do in Europe, no one's going to buy it again.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're in the business of, we want people to not just look good, but actually wear amazing fabrics, amazing products. And then how are they going to look in it? Right? What's the aesthetic that they resonate with? That's the photo shoot. That's the creative. That's the what we put on Instagram, TikTok. That's what I put on LinkedIn. Right? And then the third is the storytelling. Right? How do the product and the visuals craft a story so that you can actually tell, someone can read, someone can understand?
Yeah, I definitely. So on this podcast, everybody we talk to is much like yourself, where they're not just thinking about how do I sell product or how do I push product, but it's how do I build a brand. And I do think those are two very different things. I think especially in e-commerce where there are a lot of people that are just, how do I sell product? I mean, there's thousands of different people dropping merch or dropping, fast fashion, whatever it might be, airdropping things, right? Their focus isn't necessarily on all three of those pieces, right? It just might be on one, because it's not super difficult to create amazing visuals and push it hard on Facebook and get some sales. I think what's really cool about Magnetic and about, yourself and some of the people we have on here is how much emphasis is put on not just getting the customer, but like, that's just the beginning. It's like, how do I make sure when they get my product that it feels like it was made just for them? Yeah. That the communication post-purchase is just as amazing as it was when they were walking in the door, and that they're now becoming, advocates for the brand because they love everything that we've done, not just from the beginning, but from, the entire process. Yeah.
Have you heard of like anyone that you've spoken to on the podcast or just that you've experienced where it's just like, holy shit, this is like a great customer journey. This is a great like experience that I've had?
Yeah, not so much for myself with apparel, just because I think I'm not the biggest apparel shopper. I think a lot of the times I am not the target demographic for some of these like really curated and passionate brand communities as far as apparel. However, we talked to a company, Dr. Dabber. They do devices, vape devices, their cannabis brand. And just like listening to her describe how important every single customer was. Obviously, they sell really expensive products, but personal handwritten notes, not just in the beginning, but at scale, they're still, able to do this to where this device is sort of the entry point into their brand, and they use it as really a long-term relationship. The things they do with events, the things they do where there's no questions asked. Like there's an issue, it's fixed. If there's a problem, if there's a question, it's answered. I think that listening to her, Marissa, talk about how they look at the customer as really the starting point as opposed to the product, right? That to me is really fascinating. And I think the best brands are the ones that do that. And sometimes it can be challenging, I think, to think like that, because it's like, how do you scale that, right? But then when I talk to brands that are, 200,000 plus customers and they're still able to create that, it tells me maybe there is a way to scale that where, you're just kind of using it as a cop-out, that as you grow, obviously you're not going to be able to do as much, but it doesn't mean that still shouldn't be, one of the most important pieces of your brand.
Yeah, that's always interesting. That's the same way how I view, it's all about relationship, and two, Um, yeah. So like, I genuinely think I tell this to some people where we're basically in the service business, right? Like our job as a company is to serve you in the best way possible. What does that mean? The best customer service, the best fit, the best website journey, and the best checkout process, the best way to read something and understand something on a website via product description. That is our service. The product is the exchange. That's how I view like this business. And I think a lot of great brands, like you said, like she obviously views it the same way. And so, but a lot of these big commercial brands, I think it's just transaction, product, at the end, customers at the end. No, the customer's right in the beginning and they're with you till the very end. Right. So it's like I have my handwritten notes here, right? Like I have QR codes. You can learn about me. You can learn about our factories. I sign it, every single one. And it's to a point where I'm like hesitant to go to a 3PL because I want to do it in-house. I want to have that journey, that experience saying, oh, if you need something, oh, you want it express right now, boom, done. Right? Like you can't do that to a lot with like other like 3PLs or just outsourcing. You can, but it's a better experience with handwritten notes, packaging, stickers, like card inserts, all these things that you feel like you're a part of this brand as opposed to you're just a customer that got a product by a 3PL that just sent it. Thanks. And like I'm actually dealing with it right now and talking to people about it. And so it's an interesting kind of way to think about brands and that point of like scalability. It's scalable if you make it scalable. Like people are like, oh, handwritten notes aren't scalable. It can be to a certain extent, right? You just have to focus on it. If people don't care about it, they're not going to scale with it. So I don't know. That's how I view it.
Yeah, I think the other thing that comes to mind when you say you're describing the exchange with your customers as sort of a service, right? And the product is sort of the key that unlocks everything that your brand is. I think for brands like you, right, it's easier to make the transition into something like a subscription play. I think in e-commerce, everybody's trying to figure out how do I get stickier customers because there's always new brands that are always launching amazing products. How do I keep them around? How do I keep them from going to Amazon? And a lot of brands have turned to subscription offerings, whether it's a membership or, some sort of buy-in yearly subscription where you get a certain amount of products or a box offering, right? I think when you build a company like you do, and like a lot of the brands we have on, it's a much easier transition into running some sort of like membership play because that's what you're doing. You're offering a service. The product is just a part of that service.
Yeah, definitely. I've always kind of had that mentality of let's be a real kind of club and, clubs you buy into, right? So, and what does that look like? Whether that's product, whether that's events, whether that's certain things that you get digitally via like experience or content. That is definitely something that I want to incorporate into the brand. We're not there yet. I think, let's just get as many club members as we can so they can actually experience what that would be like potentially. And then now we're starting to actually create this kind of community that's really, really exclusive for the members that actually care and want to be a part of it, that have invested either money, time, like engagement, right? Like I don't just view, like obviously like to be a part of the club, you have to own our products, but engagement's also a huge thing that I think a lot of people don't necessarily factor in, right? Like someone who purchased one product but engages with us every day, reposts, talks to us, talks to their friends about it, that's someone that we want. It's not necessarily someone that's always like, obviously I love both, right? But, that's kind of the way that I could potentially, we see ourselves growing and moving forward to elevate our brand to a different kind of level.
So I think what's really interesting is exactly what you said is when the customer becomes the beginning, the starting point, you can start to have different types of customers that are just as valuable as someone who spends $1,000 a year. Maybe you have a customer that spends $100 a year, but they are getting 9 referrals for you a year.
Right.
So I think that that's an interesting dynamic of let's keep, obviously your whales happy, but then let's galvanize or empower some of these these brand grinders, for lack of a better term, to go out and help you build this thing. I would personally love to hear, this is something that I was thinking about before, is there any oh shit moment, you're thinking about when you're building your brand for the past, 2 years, 3 years that you have, was there any oh shit moments during that first year or two of building for you, and would love to hear what that was.
Dude, I had a million oh shit moments. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. You graduate college, you go to finance for a year. That's all you know. I literally, when I started, I had to Google what is a supplier, because I thought a supplier meant 10 different things. I thought a supplier was your fulfillment center and the person that made the fabric plus, the person that, it was this entire thing. So the real oh shit moment, the first one was the first year I found a factory. It was in India. And I basically was working with him for a year, developing the product, doing all these things. I got the shirts. They're the same shirts, the same style, blue with a white collar, pink, gray, and hunter green with a white collar, Oxford, button down, untucked, whatever. And I get them. I don't actually test the fabric. I try it on, I look at it, I'm so excited, I'm so pumped. I'm like, all right, this is it. So I'm like, all right, do the bulk shipment, do the bulk order. I get it. We do the photo shoot. After the photo shoot, because the models, wore it, I took it to the dry cleaner. The dry cleaner calls me 3 days later, and says, hey, you might want to come here. All the shirts are white. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, oh, all the shirts are white. I think you should come here. I sprint the fastest I've ever ran prior to my high school glory days of sports. And it's 7 blocks I run. I look at it. All the shirts are white. All the color just wiped off the shirts. And I'm like, holy shit, I just lost, thousands of dollars. And that's because I didn't check the fabric. I wasn't working with a quality supplier. I didn't ask them about testing. I didn't do anything I was supposed to do. And I couldn't sell the shirts. I basically threw the shirts out. I kept one as a, kind of a memento. And yeah, from there, it was I don't know what I'm doing. I gotta wake the hell up. And then that's when I hid this entire second year of really doing my research, not messing around, flying to Portugal. Once I knew Portugal was the place I was going to do it, knocking on every single door of the factories there and saying, who's the best one? Having I was at an Airbnb. I stayed in a hotel for a couple of days. I had the lobby, the concierge call the factories for me and speak Portuguese and say, hey, I have this guy here that wants a meeting with you, translated into Portuguese because they didn't speak English. And that's how I got my meetings. And then I pitched them. I talked to them. You know, the people that did speak English, the people that were on the phone like didn't speak English. And yeah, it's like, but that was like the biggest oh shit moment. I still have oh shit moments. Like yesterday, I had an oh shit moment where like the fabric was out of stock and I had to like, you know, figure it out. But it's fine now. But it's you know, it's just operating a business. You just have oh shit moments. I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly like talking to people what I should do. You know, it's always like that.
That's really cool, man. It's funny because I hear stories like that where you experience something that was like just really probably threw you back mentally, where you probably at some point were like, dang, like, am I actually prepared to do this? I started a little apparel company during my time at Klaviyo just for fun, just to kind of see how e-commerce worked, because I was selling to them every day and I wanted to kind of speak to them a little bit better. Yeah. And so I started this apparel company that was inspired by gaming. And basically what I would do is reach out to small game developers and say, hey, we'll do a drop for your game when it launches, because they had no idea how to do any marketing or merch. And so I finally secured, you know, a game that I could do this with, and it was a big deal. There was a lot of orders. And so I ordered all this. This is my first time, just like you. And it was screen printed. And I guess when I was doing the actual order system, I had it on an XL shirt because that's what I wore. And I'm just, you know, an idiot. And so I was like designing it on an XLT. And then I ordered, I think it was like 1,500 shirts. And they all came with the screen print design of the XL, but it was the same size for every shirt. And the large majority of the shirts were small and medium. I guess gamers are a little bit smaller, but I got the shirts, I pulled them up, and they were just completely unusable. Like some of the print was off the shirt. And I just remember having a full-blown panic attack because the small game developer, like they had already prepped this thing. They hyped it up. They're like, we got these crazy designs. We're partnering with this new company. Yeah. And yeah, man, I had to toss pretty much all of them out and had to redo it. We eventually got the shirts like 3 or 4 weeks late. And that was my career in e-commerce. So it's great to hear on the other side of that story is people like you who are like, you know what, I made a mistake, but let's keep going. You know, for me, it was like,
well, no, dude, for me, it was, you know, I don't like stress out like easily. That was probably like one of the biggest, you know, that's like, you know, stress moments I've ever had.
Yeah.
Because it's like your business. It's like, you know, especially at that stage, even at this stage, like you think every little thing is going to matter and like everything is going to be so impactful to the growth of your business. And then you just start realizing like, you know, just keep going, you know, but that was like the first one where like mentally I wasn't prepared for it. I was 22, 23. And it's like, wow, I just lost my money because I bootstrapped, right? Like my savings from just basically a year in finance. And it's like, is this going to be it? Like, how do I find another factory? I thought this was like the only factory I can ever get. And it like took like maybe a couple months to just reprocess and be like, yo, like, just like get up. What are you going to do next? It's not over. Obviously like talks with people, like your family that it's just like, you know, you can do this. Yeah, but there's always stuff like that, you know, but those are the pivotal like turning points of like growth, you know?
Yeah. I was thinking maybe it was at that point when you had all these white t-shirts where you're like, hey, let's rebrand to the white shirts, you know?
Oh, but, no. Actually, I rebranded factories. Yeah. And photo shoots and models. I was like using all my friends. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like the brand, if you saw my brand, I'll send you pictures like 2 years ago, and people 2 years ago, like remember it, and it wasn't a good site, but it's so different. It's like, it doesn't even feel like it's the same brand.
Yeah.
But the vision was always there, right? It's just like, I wasn't mature yet. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I didn't see the market. I wasn't getting customers. Like, it's like so many things are like impactful for like developing your brand and your aesthetic.
Yeah. And just not giving up, I think is a big part of it's in there, right? It's somewhere buried in there. You just got to stick around long enough to get to it. So
stick around, but also you gotta like back it up. You gotta
Yeah.
work super hard.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So you mentioned you've got some customers that have been around from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have like a favorite customer story or like a crazy customer story?
Um, yeah. Well, this isn't crazy, but my birthday was like a couple or last week, and I just got a card in the mail from a customer or from a club member that I have no idea who. I've never met him, and it was just like a super nice note saying like, I love like the experience, like the brand, your products are amazing, like happy birthday. And that was just kind of cool, because like I don't like say it's my birthday. So that was one, but the craziest was, um, I got in the mail this one of our club members owns like a candy manufacturer in, I forgot which state, somewhere in the Midwest, I think. And it was like he got the shirts and then he wanted to exchange it for a different size, and I was like helping him out with it, everything. And like he knew I was the founder just because like my email signature. Plus, like I'm still a one man company, so like all of the customer services are me still. Um, but he sent me with the exchanged shirts. He sent me like a full box of like his candy that he like makes, and they're like Swedish fish, hard candy, like everything. And I thought it was like, I didn't know what it was because it's this big box that it's only two shirts. You don't need a big box. And I open it and it's all these like foam, all of like the foam packaging. And I'm like, it could be, it could be anything. Like I genuinely didn't, and it didn't have his name on it. It didn't have it. It was just like a box. And I like genuinely like was kind of scared a little bit to like put my hand inside it. I didn't know what it was. And it like freaked me out. And then I like, pulled it out and it was just like a ton of candy. Uh, but that was kind of like, that was just weird because of the experience, and he didn't say anything and there was no label. Um, but yeah, like that's one.
That's cool. I definitely don't know how I'd react to getting a massive package with
It
air
was a
bubbles in it.
big, it was like, you know, 30 plus, like candies.
Wow.
It was a lot.
So you had your home address then on there, I'm assuming.
Yeah, because like I
Yeah.
did out of my apartment for like the last 2 years. I now have a showroom
Yeah.
in New York, which like is a mansion to me because it's still a small showroom, but I was operating for 2 years next to my bed, a desk, my bed, and a pile of boxes to the ceiling.
Mm.
No space. I had to literally, you know, step over boxes to get to other boxes or to get to like a shirt if I was like going to the grocery store, to like put clothes on. Like it was, I think people would look at it and they're just like, how the hell did you live like that? But you do.
Yeah. It's a good reminder of what you're working towards every day when you trip over it. It's hard to forget what you're
Yeah, no,
doing
it's
when it's
it's
literally
hard to
next to
forget, and it's a great reminder. Yeah, waking up, but I don't know. I'm a simple guy. I just need a desk and a bed and some place to like fulfill. Uh,
I
so
love
yeah,
that. Cool, man. So we always end these things. I know we're run up on time. I always like to end these things. Some people probably sleeping through the whole podcast. There might be some people just catching the short form. I want to make sure that everybody that listens has at least like one takeaway from you, in regards to, how they can continue to grow exactly what you're talking about, their branding, their presence, their differentiation, whether it's the product, whether it's the visuals, whether it's the messaging. Really want to get from you is like, what's one thing, one piece of advice that you'd give those marketers or business owners today on how they can sort of build that community and build that differentiation in a crowded market?
yeah, you have to be so authentic, and it could be like an obvious answer, but like no one has your aesthetic, no one has your vibe, no one has like your ideas and your presence and your vision. What separates people in this world and just in general, right? Like what separates me from you versus Jake versus everyone is the fact that we think differently, we like different things. So incorporate that into your brand. right? And then there's, the more you do that, the more uh, it can resonate. It has the potential to resonate with other people that are similar, because there's a billion people in this world, right? There's got to be a decent amount that think similarly, that like similar things, that view similarly to you. So do that, but do it in a way that you package it that is very elevated, on brand, and everything's consistent. So if you say, and like, you do certain things the way you do it, try to improve it, but always do that, right? Because if you keep mixing things up, if you keep doing things that aren't true to who you are, whether that's marketing, branding, whatever, people will know. And then people will be like, what the hell is going on? Like, I don't understand what this brand is doing, because you're trying to test a million things that aren't who you are. And I've always kept everything super consistent. Everything is like who I am. And it's also like who I learn from. So there are consumers, or like there are club members that I learn from. There are different countries that I go to that I learn from. And that's just, as a designer, as an entrepreneur, you say, okay, how can I package that and take that influence and do it in the way that Le Alfré does it? And that's always going to be like my biggest advice for like differentiation.
Yeah, I love that. I think when hearing you talk about that, I think ties into, the reason why I named the podcast Magnetic was there is sort of an element to the brands we bring on that is magnetic in terms of it's attractive. It brings people to you. But I think there's this other element that is maybe a little bit more hidden, and that's this idea of like magnets kind of pushing each other away when they're all the same charge. And I think like what I'm hearing you say is a little bit of like, don't be afraid to be different. Don't be afraid to sort of have a different charge to your brand, because in fact, that different charge is actually what's going to create an even stronger bond, because there's a customer out there that feels like your brand was made just for them when you're doing it in a way that's different.
And it's so easy. I did this all last year. It's so easy to look at other brands and see what they're doing and try to mimic them, because you say, oh, they're a multi-million-dollar brand.
Yeah.
They're doing it this way. Oh, I should do it that way because it's working. No, absolutely not. You should do whatever the hell you want to do, because it makes sense for your brand, your demographic, your strategy. Just because someone's pricing it at that price point does not mean you have to do it at yours if they're a competitor, or you think that they have the same demographic, right? I think every brand owner, every marketer falls victim to that concept, because it's really difficult to get out of, because you're saying like, that must be working because they're bigger than me, or they're like, it seems like it's working. But I've learned just by doing that and seeing the results of it, and now doing our way, the Le Alfré way, is like, people will notice and like be attracted to what you're building because it's made for them. You're just doing it your way and not like everyone else's way. So that's kind of an add-on to that.
Yeah, I love that, man. I'm really excited to see where you guys go. I think maybe we even have like a little, a year from now, love to get you back on here and see, all these things that you're talking about and building for. I want to see like where that goes, and love to be a part of that process. Thank you so much for coming on. Loved learning more about your brand. And we're super excited to share this with the rest of the world. So appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Those are super interesting questions. I love these questions, so happy to do it in a year.
Awesome, dude. Thank you.
All right, thanks, man.